All right.
That was Matt Flynn before.
Yes. We're gonna bookend you again.
Hey, for me?
Apparently so.
Oh, they're passing out everywhere.
Yeah.
Are you stressed?
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you very much. Are there public comments? Lisa, is anybody online for public comment? Is there anybody in the room that wishes to public comment? Is there anybody in the room that wishes to comment? All right, we will proceed with the volunteer interviews. And who is online first, Lisa, with the volunteer interview? All right.
Clara was on.
Mark, would you like to go first and basically introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself. You only get about 2 minutes, so you have to narrow it down to the real highlights. All right, and then why you're interested in the committee. And then we will, after you're done, Chris will be next. Go ahead, Mark.
Absolutely. So my name is Mark Hubley. I'm a resident here in Rochester in Olmsted County, of course. And I moved here 3 years ago, but my heart's always been in Minnesota. My background in education includes business, real estate, and architecture, as well as marketing. But marketing just was an aside just because it was interesting. I've served as a board member of a very large homeowner association in Arizona, and I also have experience dealing with county needs and city needs as a business owner. Our family used to own a factory in Hutchinson, Minnesota, 85,000 square feet building on a large 3-acre site. So we had a lot of cooperation and partnership with the city and the county and developing the land around us. So I feel like I'm very good at negotiating. I'm a very concerned citizen that wants to make Olmsted County and Rochester even better than it is now. It's tremendous, and we want to maintain that, but we have a lot of growth coming, and I want to be instrumental in helping to preserve what we have and improving where we can go. And I know that there are a lot of pertinent issues that the county has on its table right now, including needs for the recycling center and the solid material removal facility and so forth, and the mulching facility. I want to be part of helping all of those plans get on the best footing they can be on. My experience in sales and negotiation helps me to make people feel like they've been heard if there are meetings that we have where people want to speak their mind. And I'm good at understanding the balances and needs between business and the community.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mark?
Thank you for applying.
Yes.
Thank you.
Might want to explain the process to them.
Sure.
That it will be, we take these under advisement. We generally vote later in the meeting, then we'll send you a letter. But we have 2 positions open. There's 2 people applying, so fairly good for that.
Fairly good chances. Well, I know I'll be an active member. I watched your December 16th meeting, and that's exactly the type of meeting I'm experienced being with on the with the Oro Valley Town Council when we would be represented there in our homeowner community, and also in the McLeod County meetings where we would be representing our business and trying to work with them. So I'm very familiar with those meetings.
That'd be great. Thanks.
And if you can stay and listen to Chris, and then following that, we will carry on with the rest of our meeting. And then we vote at the end of the meeting, and then you will be notified. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Chris, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm applying for the Extension Committee, and I live just north of Rochester. I have spent the last 6 years on the Wabasha County Extension Committee. And during that time, I did move to Rochester, got married, and my wife lives in Rochester, so that's why the change in counties. As far as personally, I have a master's degree in business administration from the University of Minnesota. And the last 9 years I've spent working as an agriculture loan officer, ag and small business loan officer in Plainview, Minnesota. I have a background in agriculture. Both my grandfathers were farmers. My brother and cousin currently are dairy farmers in Wabasha County. And so I've got a pretty extensive background when it comes to general agriculture, as well as my recent 9 years as an ag loan officer. So that's the quick and dirty of it.
Well, thank you very much for your application. And there are 2 positions available there also, so hopefully at the end of the meeting, when we vote, and then you'll be notified. So we appreciate your involvement in the civic opportunities here in Olmsted County. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I will
All
call.
right. Do you see on the screen that Commissioner Cascaden had her hand up?
Yes, Commissioner Kiskaden is attending distance, and we are under the emergency rules, which will allow Sheila to attend by distance, and that also means that we will have all of our votes that will be on roll call according to the rules. So thank you very much. I will call the meeting to order. The first thing on the agenda is a public hearing in, excuse me, the Pledge of Allegiance. Very good. Thank you, I appreciate that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, Kim. We'll get it. All right, so now we will proceed to the public hearing. And just how we're going to operate, we are going to have concurrently Mark Engel and Mr. Hill talk about both of these issues, and we'll hear from both of them. And then we will ask for public comment on these issues, and then we will vote on them one at a time. So, first of all, Mr. Engel and Mr. Hill, who's going to go first? If you could step forward and give us the information on solid waste and composting changes.
All right. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Mark Engel with the Planning Department. We are bringing forward the composting ordinance and some updates and changes to the solid waste management ordinance. We've got one presentation, and Tony and I will jump back and forth throughout the presentation.
Thank you.
Feel free to stop us, ask questions, wherever you're at along the way. All right, there we go. So to start with a little background, the Planning Environmental Resources staff have been approached by a number of different groups, residents and local businesses that were interested in commercial food waste recycling services, so creating a business. Also some nonprofits and businesses interested in providing those collection and hauling services. And companies and nonprofits interested in developing commercial aerobic and anaerobic facilities. So different types of composting facilities. The ordinances that we had, both the solid waste ordinance and the zoning ordinance, were silent on these 2 particular items. Our ordinance just didn't address them. So we wanted to take the opportunity to update those.
And so we had to take a look at how the waste was separated from the generators, how they separate that food waste at the curbside or the dumpsters at commercial facilities. And then we also had to look at the storage. How is that material going to be stored? And then the collection and hauling of that food waste. And finally, we had to look at the facility, how the zoning would be impacted, as well as permitting of the facilities, whether it's going to be a commercial composting site or anaerobic digester plant.
So as you're aware, we asked for an interim moratorium on July of 2020, which you extended through July of 2022 to permit staff, both environmental resources staff and planning staff, to bring forward an ordinance that would address these issues that Tony identified. We worked with the Attorney's Office, environmental resources, planning staff, collaboratively to bring forward both the zoning ordinance and the solid waste ordinance together. They're interchangeable, or they work together. We took our ordinance addresses state statutes, Minnesota rules, chapter 7035, solid waste, And we take guidance from reference materials such as the MPCA, the Minnesota and United States Composting Council, Association of Recycling Managers, model composting ordinances, and then we reviewed existing ordinances within Minnesota and throughout the upper Midwest. So to start with, now we're talking mostly about the zoning ordinance. The ordinance does not regulate the accessory uses that are part of current farming practices. So within our farming community, there are certain types of biodigestion, composting that are going on. This is not regulating that accessory use to those farming practices. It also doesn't regulate a yard waste that you may have raked up in the fall, and we're not intending it for a composting facility. Just a pile of leaves is not part of the composting ordinance. What is composting, or what do we regulate? So two key terms that are found both in the solid waste ordinance and in the zoning ordinance is, the first one is compost. It's the product resulting from the controlled biological decomposition of organic material. So you have to have that first. And it'll come, you'll see this as a theme throughout the presentation. Source separated organic materials is the other term. And they are materials that are separated at the source by the waste generator for the purpose of preparing them for use in compost. The key there is separated at the source. That source could be you and I in our backyard. It could be from a school, could be from a large commercial facility. These two definitions are found in both ordinances and play a key role as we move forward in defining what is compost. Technology move. Can you move it forward one for me? There we go. Summary of the revisions to the zoning ordinance. So Article 2, we're adding definitions related to composting, the two that I just showed you, key parts to that. Articles 5, 7, and 8 are the additions of allowed conditional uses. So they're all conditional uses, both in the agricultural, commercial, and rural service districts. I'll go into this a little more later, but there are 3 uses that are being established, and each of those have zoning districts where they're allowed. Backyard compost, that's like having your own composting in your rear yard. Those are allowed as an accessory use in every district. The compost commercial small facility, we identified a number of districts where you could do that. And that is a facility that's up to 120 cubic yards of material. And the compost the state of Minnesota permitted is limited to a few districts, A1, A2, industrial, and the ag resource commercial districts. And this is a facility. This is something that would act like an industrial facility. Article 10. All right. I see it. It goes quick. Okay, here we go. Article 10. Back one more. Here we go. During our review of the solid waste ordinance, there was one section that, in working with Mr. Tom Canan, that he really wanted to have updated both in the solid waste and the zoning ordinance, and it's section 1010, exterior storage in automobiles. We're revising the text specifically to bring the language in the text up to date with certain types of waste that were not identified. And, specifically, yard waste is probably the key item that was not, or not yard waste, e-waste was the key item that was not showing up in our definition. So the 2 sections that are being revised are the exterior storage in a residential district and exterior storage in a commercial district. And those are not related to composting, so they're outside of composting.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
you're talking about people who keep flats and stuff on their property or wood, that kind of.
So yeah, exterior storage, there's certain things that you can store in your yard, and there's certain things that we regulate in where you might be able to store them in your yard. The language that defines that our zoning enforcement officer would go out on there's a specific definition, and we're revising that or updating it to include things like e-waste, like TVs and computers. Those type of items just were not ever included in that definition because at the time that that definition was written, that was not a concern. It was not something that was top of mind.
This is a funny question, but what about people who have backyard chickens, for example, and I think there's straw and that sort of stuff. How do you classify that?
It would be part of the accessory use. So if you're allowed to do that, there's a certain amount of things that are expected with that particular use. And that wouldn't fall under this exterior storage.
Chicken.
A certain type of chicken, right? No, just, I know that a lot of people are keeping backyard chickens now, and that must make some kind of waste as well.
Sure. There's an expected, as part of that use, like in all uses, there's an expectation. And that would be considered accessory to that use.
Okay.
This is really talking about, we often find this being employed when we get to cars that aren't registered parked in the front yard of a residence. And our zoning enforcement officer uses this to nudge the resident into compliance.
Okay.
All right, so the balance of our edits to the zoning ordinance are in section 1010, specifically a new section 10.53 compost. And we, as I mentioned, we create 3 new uses: composting backyard, composting commercial small facility, and compost state of Minnesota permitted facility. So compost backyard, I'm going to go through just a brief overview of them. Compost backyard is an accessory use in all districts, and they're each separated by volume. So in a backyard, you have a maximum volume of, it's a height of 5 feet tall by 5 feet by 5 foot square. That's the area that you can have a backyard composting. It's 4.6 cubic yards of material. The next one is compost commercial small facility. It's a conditional use permit in all the districts that it's allowed in. The districts are the same ones that I identified in the chart before. The volume shall not exceed 120 cubic yards of source separated organic material or compost material on the site at any time. So that's those first 2 definitions that I showed on the screen. The 120 cubic yards is actually set in statute. And it is permitted as a zoning permit, but it would also be permitted by Tony's group. And we had a question at the planning commission of what's 120 cubic yards? What is that like? And as Tony pointed out, a large dump truck that we have is about 10 cubic yards. So that would be 12 large dump trucks of material on site at any one time. The compost state of Minnesota permitted facility, again, it's a conditional use permit wherever it's allowed. It's allowed in a limited number of districts, and the volume is expected to exceed 120 cubic yards of source separated organic material or compost material. This is going to be permitted from the state of Minnesota, not unlike a landfill site. Tony's group would have a participation in that permitting process, but the permit would actually be issued from the state of Minnesota.
Okay, now it's the solid waste. So as Mark mentioned, that we matched our backyard composting with the zoning ordinance. So it's the 4.6 cubic yards, and any finished compost produced shall be used on site, not transported off-site or used for off-site sale. And then the small commercial composting sites that we're talking about, I just wanted to kind of show some examples of what they would look like. So 120 cubic yards, you can see the windrow on the left. So it'd be 3 by 6 by 180 would be 120 cubic yards. And then we've also had one person that's interested in Olmsted County has these Johnson Sioux units, composting bins. You can see that's about 2 yards, so that'd be about roughly 60 of these on a site. And then as Mark mentioned, I just wanted to throw in what 20 cubic yard container would look like. So 6 of these would, 120 cubic yards on a site. And so the other thing was Mark mentioned was the compost Minnesota permitted facility. And I just want to compare that to our yard waste compost site, which is permitted by the state, just to kind of give you a scale. And so you can see that on our site, it's about 9 acres of compost, and then we manage about 14,000 to 16,000 cubic yards annually. So that would be a big, big site. So I just want to give you some comparisons. We know that the NPCA is looking at a food waste hierarchy, and you can see from the top to bottom, most preferred to least preferred, the source reduction, the food to people, the food to animals, anaerobic digestion, usable as energy, and digestate, then the compost, and then an AD facility again that doesn't use energy or to digestate, waste energy and landfill. And so what we're talking about is commercial facilities within that yellow and brown area that we're looking at today. So why food waste hierarchy? We want to move this material up the chain, up the pyramid. And so landfilling food waste, we know that it releases methane when it decomposes. It's 20 times more potent than methane is than CO2. It takes up valuable landfill space. It hinders recovery of the nutrients, as well as the loss of that biogas, that methane that we can convert it into a biogas. And so that's why the PCA wants to move this higher up the hierarchy. Next slide, please, Mark. And so food waste is not ideal fuel in resource recovery as well. We have high moisture content, low heat value, and then again, it hinders the nutrients and then the ability to capture that gas to move it into a biogas. As we talked about earlier, when I talked about the 4 steps, the first step is the source separate organic material. And this is, again, allowing people to separate that out, voluntarily separating that material out of their trash. Next slide. And we also, number 2, we had to look at the storage. And so for generators electing to aggregate their source separate organic materials from collection, they must separate and place the material in an easily distinguishable container provided by the licensed hauler. And you can see from the pictures, it's different type of storage containers from a restaurant to maybe what it would be look at the curbside compared to maybe what a pickup would look like at your front door, using this type of service. We also had to look at the collection, how the material was going to be collected. And so again, we had to look at the containers. And a big thing we looked at was reducible materials. And we wanted to be collected at a minimum once per week because of the problem with vectors and smells and things like that. And then the hauling. We also had to look at the hauling aspect of it. And we know that we have our 8 licensed haulers. And then how would this material be licensed? So we looked at a two-tiered system using our current licensed haulers as an A license, and then a future hauling this material as a Class B license. And so you can see here's on the left hand is our Class A license that we currently have. They would be allowed to haul source separated materials. But then we have these other folks that are interested that Mark talked about at the beginning, from nonprofits as well as small businesses. Do they haul that with a pickup, van, box truck, compactor? So some things that we had to look at as far as licensing. And then finally, the permit, the facility itself, the recycling facility itself. We had to look at zoning. We had to look at an application process for permitting these facilities that are less than 120 cubic yards. We had to look at their annual permit process, and then on-site inspections as well as annual reports associated with these composting facilities. And then with this, as the material moves up the hierarchy, Mr. Tom Kinane also wanted us to let you know that as the material moves up, there's potential for the material to leave the county as well to a permanent facility within the region, or even possibly a permanent facility outside the state. But there's just that potential as we move this waste up that we currently don't have a facility located here, and it could be transported out of county. And then we just wanted to do some cleanup as well as our current ordinance. We wanted bulky items. Right now it's silent on bulky items, and so this is bulky items being the mattresses, the major appliances, furniture, and so we wanted a definition of bulky items, as well as Mark mentioned about the electronic waste. We want to put a definition of electronic waste in the ordinance. And then also registered haulers. We want to make sure that yard waste, people using our compost facility are registered, as well as the lawn care services and people hauling bulky items. And that was another big thing that we wanted to address with registration. And then next. And as Mark mentioned, the storage, we wanted to match what the zoning ordinance related to outdoor storage. So our solid waste ordinance and outdoor storage matches the zoning ordinance. So those are a few items we wanted to clean up while we had this opportunity to open up the solid waste ordinance.
All right.
Okay, very good. Does the commissioners have any questions?
Nope.
Any questions? Okay. So then we will open up the hearing. Are there anybody in line to comment? Is there anybody from the general public that wishes to comment? Is there anybody from the general public that wishes to comment?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We will have to call the roll because we're having an online meeting. So Lisa, are you ready to call the roll?
I am. Commissioner Podolsky.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
Commissioner Cascaden.
Aye.
And Commissioner Flynn.
Aye.
All right, the motion carries. The public hearing is closed. The next order of business now is that we want to take these one at a time. So we would need a motion to approve for the composting, first of all. Changes, composting changes to the zoning ordinance.
So move.
All right, I have a motion to approve the composting. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Brown, a second from Flynn. Lisa, can you call the roll again?
Commissioner Podolsky.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
Commissioner Cascaden.
Aye.
And Commissioner Flynn.
Aye.
All right, so that has also carried. Now,
Motion to approve the second piece.
all right, so
Second.
we have a motion and a second for changes to the solid waste organization ordinance. All right, so Lisa, can you call the roll on that?
Commissioner Podolsky.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
Commissioner Cascaden.
Aye.
And Commissioner Flynn.
Aye.
All right, the motion carries. So both ordinances are now approved and in place. Very good. All right, so we shall move then to the consent agenda. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Engel and Mr. Hill, for your excellent presentation. We really appreciate it. All right, so the consent agenda. First of all, letter A, approve the January 4th, 2022 County Board meeting minutes. Letter B, designate official publication. Letter C, approve change order and final pay. Letter D, approve application for the 2022 Help America Vote Act grants program. Letter E, accept refugee health screening grant award. Letter F, approve December 15th, 2021 emergency declaration. Letter G, approve the use of Minnesota Statute Chapter 400 purchasing authority for the Olmsted Waste Energy Facility for the purchase of boiler tubes. Letter H, approve Seneca Energy Park agreement with Rochester Area Economic Development Incorporated. Letter I, approve annual funding memorandum of understanding with Rochester Area Economic Development Incorporated to provide countywide economic development services for the county. And letter J, approve the 2022 employee assistance contract. I'm looking.
Approval.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Brown, a second from Flynn. All right, and Lisa, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Podolsky.
Aye.
Commissioner,
Aye.
Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
Commissioner Cascaden.
Aye.
Commissioner Flynn.
Aye.
All right, the consent agenda is approved. The regular agenda, we're at number 4 on your agenda, discussion decision items. Letter A, 19,915,000 general obligation bonds, series 2022B funding the county's 2022 capital improvement plans projects.
Excellent. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Wilfredo Romancata, Chief Financial Officer. And as you stated, we're requesting for the County Board to set the sale for the General Obligation Bonds 2022B in the estimated amount of 19.9 million. Just to refresh our memories, back in December 14th, we held a public hearing and approved the Olmsted County 2022-2026 Capital Improvement Plan. In such plan, it was approved to be in the best interest of the county to issue general obligation bonds in that approximate amount of 19.9 million for the 2022 capital expenses. So, unless you have questions for me, it's time for roll call.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from
It's a good deal.
Commissioner Beer, second from Brown.
Commissioner Podolsky?
Aye.
Commissioner Beer?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Wright?
Aye.
Commissioner Cascaden?
Aye.
And Commissioner Flynn?
Aye.
All right, it is approved. Very good. Letter B, COVID update.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Mike Mielis. I'm one of the Associate Directors of Public Health with Olmsted County. Megan Sheridan will be joining me in providing a COVID update. And I'm going to share my slides here. Let's see how this works. All right, I'll let that come into view. It looks like everyone can see it. I just wanted to briefly start with our update by sharing that the pandemic continues. Cases have increased, and we are continuing to see the impact from the Omicron variant. We have also seen efforts nationwide to reflect what is basically the ongoing pandemic. Over the weekend, the HHH at the federal level renewed the public health emergency declaration that began way back in January of 2020. And that's important because that gives public health certainly, but quite a bit of departments, services, continues some waivers, and it allows for adjustments and some flexibility to be able to provide services to clients. So just as an example that the pandemic continues, and so does the declaration. So with that, I will control the slides, and I'll ask Megan to share her knowledge.
Thanks, Mike, and hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So we're just going to start off like we typically do and talk through the current situation that we're seeing in the United States and Minnesota, just to help provide a little bit of context for what we're seeing here in Olmsted County. So just for reference, 99.57% of United States counties currently are in the high category according to CDC. So I believe there's just maybe under 20 that aren't. What we have been seeing in the United States is the Omicron variant has continued its push. I'm here to potentially offer a little bit of hope today, not complete doom and gloom, but we have seen the growth of Omicron, especially on the East Coast, slow down a little bit. So maybe fingers crossed, we're maybe starting to see that ebb a little bit as well. We do continue to see high hospitalization rates across the United States. And we are starting to see an uptick of deaths as well. There's been around a 50% increase of deaths in the United States in the last few weeks. If we go to Minnesota, we're seeing our highest case levels we have seen the entire pandemic. That's not a new story. Our current percent positivity for Minnesota is around 17%. Today, we hit 11,000 deaths for the state. So I will say for the United States, for Minnesota, and for Olmsted County, our our picture of what our current true case count is probably a little muddled with the holiday, with MDH not reporting cases. So it's going to be very similar to this is what we know today. And as MDH is able to kind of catch up from the weekend leg or the holiday leg, we'll have a better picture. So just to try to keep that in mind. Mike, if you want to go to the next slide, that'd be great. All right, so this is looking at our testing. And so those bars are looking at what Mayo and OMC have been able to do. And then that black line is looking at our percent positivity. So let's take the black line first. We are right around 30% of our tests are coming back positive, so almost 1 in 3. We're also seeing some of the highest testing volumes we have ever seen. And again, and you can even just see the jump from week to week that we really took off right after the holidays. And again, this is just a huge kudos to our healthcare partners who've really changed the way they've been doing things to meet the testing needs. The other thing I want to point out with testing is when we're looking at our percent positivity, when we're looking at even our case count, those are only capturing our reported cases. And a reported case is either doing a PCR through your healthcare provider, or if you're using the saliva testing through the state. There are no at-home tests that are reported in our case numbers, so we know that there's probably a lot more testing happening that we are not aware of, but also our case count is probably much higher just because of that at-home testing. Mike, if you want to go to the next slide. So I thought this graph was a little bit interesting when our epidemiologist Matthew put it together, and you can kind of see we were pretty similar until Omicron. And so we're hoping to and again, really just trying to call that out. From this data point too, I will tell you that our current 7-day or incidence rate over per 100,000 is at 2,706.16. So just for reference, for us to get lower than that high category, it needs to be at 100. If we go to the next slide, this is just going to give us a week-to-week look. So I believe some of you saw a similar slide to this last Friday. I will tell you we did update it today, and this is where I'm saying it's kind of on a rolling every day. We get a little bit more of an update of what the case count is. Again, underrepresented, but a better look. So I believe the slide that some saw last Friday had us under 3,000 cases with data coming in over the weekend. And we have jumped up for that week of 1.5. Close to 3,500 cases. Currently for this past week, we're just shy of 2,000. I would suspect we will continue to see that jump again as more tests are getting processed. I will say Olmsted County also has the unfortunate honor of having the highest incident rate in the entire state of Minnesota. I do think that comes with a couple of caveats though. Don't get me wrong, we have a ton of COVID in our community. I'm not taking that away, but because we have such the high testing capacity than a lot of others in other counties, and we have a medical community that is probably driving a little bit of our testing as well. If we go to the next slide, this is looking at hospital admissions. And so there's an important story I want us to make sure that we're telling with Omicron is, so currently we're around between 2 and 3% on a daily basis is our hospitalization rate for our cases. But that's equaling the same hospitalization rate that we were seeing back with our Delta wave, and that was at 7%. So even at a 2% hospitalization rate, we are still seeing the highest levels we saw back around a year ago. And just for some reference too, if we were to see the hospitalizations rates that we saw back a year ago, we would be looking at almost 200 cases in the hospital. So while Omicron is appearing to keeping, especially those who are vaccinated or have received an additional dose or booster out of the hospital, we're still just seeing we're still seeing that push and strain on our hospitalization system. As another important thing too here is we do see as hospitalizations are a lagging indicator. So we're suspecting this week and moving into next week, we'll really start to see the true impact of Omicron on our hospitalization system. If we go to the next slide, this is just going to be talking about some key considerations. So on a week-to-week basis, we're seeing some different demographic shifts. So I believe the last time I came and spoke to you all, we were seeing around 16 or 15% of our cases were under the age of 18. That has shot back up to around 25%. Another interesting demographic shift we saw this past week is around 85% of our cases are from Rochester, and that's slightly higher than what we're usually seeing it more around a around just more of an 80 to 75%. We are monitoring, we're starting to see a slight uptick in deaths, and I will say the majority of those have been unvaccinated. And it's important to note too, some of these deaths are actually from Delta. I think I mentioned before, we are seeing people in the hospital and staying in the hospital for longer periods of time. So we will expect to potentially see more deaths come with the again, as a lagging indicator from Omicron, but we already are starting to see some of the impacts of that. I already touched on this, so while it's hard to say that there's more than 2,000 cases or almost 3,500 cases in our community, we do know this is an underrepresentation. We've been working with schools too to help us best understand the situations that are happening within their districts, because we know that they're able and have the resources to get a lot of at-home testing out. So we've been really starting to treat schools more like a surveillance site and really relying on them to feed that information to us. And then just again, trying to call out, while we understand that Omicron is maybe causing less severe illness, that does not mean it's not taking away huge strains on our hospitalization system. We also know when we say mild, we're typically talking about those who are vaccinated or boosted versus those who are not. So it's just another consideration of, while we may be seeing milder illness, that does not mean it's not taking away from that strain on our hospital system. So if we go to the last slide, Mike, please, and then I'll turn it back over to you. So let's talk about vaccine, because that is one tool we do have that we didn't have when we were going when we were from a year ago. So just wanted to call out, this has been a true community effort. Since December 2020, we've, as Olmsted County Public Health, have held 185 clinics, and you can see that number of, we have administered almost 27,000 vaccines. So, and when I say Olmsted County Public Health, those are the clinics that we've held. We know that we've had support from many other departments and teams to be able to administer all those vaccines. The graph here is from NPR, and you can see here where we kind of stand when we're looking at eligibility for across the entire state. I will tell you, when we look at overall, Olmsted County is beating Cook County in our overall eligibility. So kudos to us on that, because you know, it's you got to have a little bit of competition here and there. When we're looking at our 5 to 11-year-olds, because that's where a lot of our efforts are, we're right around 49% of our 5 to 11-year-olds have received at least one dose. And then what we are also going to be looking at now is when we're talking about boosted or an additional dose, we are dropping that age requirement down to 16 plus. So if we look at those who are 16 or over, who have received who have completed their vaccine series, and have around 64% have received an additional dose or a booster. So those are kind of the high level data points. I believe Mike has one more slide to talk about some of our current efforts.
Thank you, Megan. And I can't emphasize how important capacity, like Megan has just shown you, in terms of epidemiology, how important that is to public health, especially during a pandemic, but even building that capacity for when we get out of this pandemic for population health. So in terms of our ongoing effort in public health, primarily, the largest amount of work is really in maintaining vaccine clinics, specifically for different reasons, variety of reasons. It could be a booster dose. It could be for a particular age group. It could be for a particular segment of the population that's underrepresented or has not had access or hasn't shown interest yet in vaccine. We continue to provide the first and second doses, and vaccine clinics have been a priority for us to keep available. We've even gone so far that I should say the vaccine team has gone so far to respond to groups in the community that have stepped up and said, we want, like it could be a particular ethnic group or somebody that wants to increase vaccination in their population. And the vaccine team has been exceptional in being flexible to help with that.
I have a question. Could you give me an idea? Give me one example of somebody that can't get a vaccine that wants one. We've been hounding people to get the vaccine. You can get them at Hy-Vee. You can get them any place. I can't believe that there's one person that wants to get the vaccine that can't get it. You can't find somebody that can't get a vaccine. I don't think that's right. I think you're wrong there.
Well,
you can walk out in the street and get a vaccine. They're probably selling them on the corner.
Right, and I think Commissioner Flynn, what I'm speaking about in terms of either not readily accessible, I think so much has changed during this pandemic, and I think when we saw Omicron come on strong, there were people in the public that changed their mind maybe, or were more interested in getting a vaccine when they saw how the vaccine, and especially if someone was boosted, really reduced the risk of severe illness and hospitalization. And so I think there are a lot of dynamics that are changing people in how they see maybe what they had originally thought was best for them. They changed their mind. And so we want in public health to be available when that occurs. Asian Pacific community, I think, is one example of a group that called us and said, we have a large number of our members that really are interested now. And so we responded. I mean, that's really what I'm speaking to, is being available and ready when someone needs or wants to get a vaccine. And of course, our healthcare system, the healthcare providers, pharmacies still remain available. So that's really what I was speaking to. So the next thing that I want to talk about real briefly was COOP, and that's continuity of operations, both a very important aspect within the county, within the public health department, but also this is a really important issue among businesses and other institutions in our community that are seeing what the high increase in cases is doing to the workforce. And so for us internally, we're making sure that we have backup plans so that we can continue our high priority services. And that takes, backup plans to backup plans. I would also say that, as I mentioned on the third bullet, consultation regarding current guidance has changed rapidly regarding a variety of things all through the pandemic. And that has been a real strain on everyone, but certainly communication and providing guidance that public health staff have been doing. Related to that, in terms of COOP 2, is you may have a quarantine or an isolation criteria to stay out, but there's aspects around their personal health. They may qualify to come back to work, but they may not be healthy enough. So there's a lot of dynamics in terms of maintaining our continuity of operations. Working with schools and their mitigation strategies, I think this is an important item to speak about because it represents that there are many local forms of government and institutions or facilities that really control the policies within their building, their structure, their organization. And so public health has continued to provide guidance. They may choose a certain policy that maybe is not what public health recommends, but we continue to work with a variety of institutions, businesses, even daycares to provide what we know is the most current public health recommendations. Finally, outreach and education efforts continue JIC is a Joint Information Center, and it's a kind of a slang for emergency preparedness. A Joint Information Center is a way that partners can work together to coordinate messaging, whether it's dovetailing or amplifying the message, making sure it's consistent and accurate. And so with that, I'll certainly pause and see if you have any other questions.
Any commissioners have any questions?
Thanks.
No
Commissioner
questions?
Wright. Commissioner Wright.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
One of the question I have is, it was announced today that the CDC website is ready for people to order up to 4 at-home test kits. So sitting at home waiting for my test results, I was particularly interested. But I'm really wondering, what the complications of that are going to be, because as far as I know, there's no direct reporting, and we really don't. I mean, this whole thing. Was a wonderful political cartoon in the Sunday paper. This messy blackboard full of scribbles and quotations with the person in a white coat standing in front of it saying, "Here are the new CDC guidelines." It's just been very confusing continuously as we keep learning about COVID, and there are new variants. And now we have this wonderful thing of new tests that we can have delivered for free to our own home, but no way then to track what the results of those tests are going to be. So it won't really inform our assessment of the scope. We'll be back to counting how many are hospitalized and how many are in ICUs, and we won't have any sense of what's the prevalence in the community, or when do we see that the pandemic is starting to ebb? Because if I can choose to just stay at home and test, that's what I'll do, right? So how are you all thinking about that in the context of trying to understand the dynamic changes that COVID has had over the last 2 years and continues to morph and change from a public health perspective?
Yeah, great question, Commissioner Cascaden. And actually, we are doing that right now. So epidemiology is a science, and there's quite a bit of art to it also, in that, there are some measures and indicators like positivity and other things, like you said, hospitalizations, deaths, even ICU, that give us a really clear and maybe acute look at the impact of the pandemic. But I think Megan and Matthew are using the data that we have available right now, knowing that there's quite a bit of home tests. Even though it's hard to get them, there still is quite a bit of home test or testing outside of the health system that we get the data on. And that so far has not hindered us to the point where we can't see trends and, like the epi curves and that kind of a thing. But I do, frankly, from my point of view, getting more tests in the hands of people is a net gain, simply because it empowers them to see, okay, sensitivity of tests are important to understand, but it allows individuals to see, are they positive or not? And that's really important, especially when it could implicate if they need to go to work or can work or not. And so I guess, yes, it is a complicating factor, and I would welcome Megan if she's got thoughts on this, but I welcome more tests, and I realize we're going to lose 100% or less of a percent of view on them. But frankly, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for those points. And I would just echo that. I think eventually, with the availability at home tests, it's keeping people from leaving, if they have symptoms and not going in and potentially spreading the virus. But I do think too, to your point too, Commissioner Cascaden, I think when we're in a, probably not too distant future, we'll start to be really looking at the hospitalizations, the ICU, and deaths, even as a more of a predictor of what is happening in our community, and could it potentially even be a predictor of when we would move this to, and I hate using this term because it's so ambiguous right now, endemic, right? Like, I think those could be kind of the big drivers there. But I think the more tests, the better off we are for people to know their status.
Well, there's also the impression that you don't get as seriously ill with the Omicron, but that's true for some, but not for all. Some people that I'm aware of have been sick for 2-3 weeks with it. So, well, we just continue to be in the middle of the muddle. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commissioners? No other questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Miles. We appreciate your report, and thank you very much, Ms. Sheridan. Thank you. All right. I'm going to ask just for a change of order here, and I'm going to ask for a motion to approve our two volunteers, Chris Stelling and Mark Hubley.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Motion from Podolsky and a second from Brown. Would you call the roll, Lisa?
Commissioner Podolsky?
Aye.
Commissioner Beer?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Wright?
Aye.
Commissioner Cascaden?
Aye.
And Commissioner Flynn?
Aye.
All right, congratulations to those two people, and somebody will be informing them. All right, we are at number 5, board and committee reports.
Number 6.
Commissioner Podolsky, do you have a report?
No, just getting started with new committee assignments, and I don't have a report.
All right. Commissioner Beer?
Nope.
Commissioner Brown?
Nothing of note.
Commissioner Cascaden, do you have a report?
I'm also going to pass this time, Mr. Chair.
The chair has no report, and Commissioner Flynn?
Yeah, I do have a thing I want to bring up. As we all know, this is election year, and I will not be seeking re-election. It's been an honor and privilege for 25 plus years. So if anybody's interested, please contact the county or me or any of the commissioners on what a commissioner's role is. But again, I will not be seeking re-election. So this will be my final year. It's been an honor and privilege, and new endeavors.
But we're stuck with you for the rest of the year.
Hey, you stuck with me for a year anyway.
Sign right now.
So, well,
Sign right now.
Yes. Now, anybody can, Commissioner Beer.
got this. Oh, one of the reasons I wanted to mention this because I believe May is sign up period. If I'm not mistaken, that has changed, and May is only 4 months away, so it comes quickly. So if gives people time to think about it or inquire about it. Obviously we got some redistricting going on, but again, we have a wonderful county. If you're interested, please look into it. You know, I think I'll be still District 4, but we don't know that yet, I believe. I think it will be. But again, the main part is so people know, check it out. Again, it's been a pleasure. So.
Right, well,
Front
it's
page
been
news.
25 years of experience, and that makes a big difference to the people on the board and the new people, especially like myself, who relied on your history and your wisdom. So I do appreciate that, and thank you.
Wow. All right.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Lisa, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Podolsky?
Aye.
Commissioner Beer?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Wright?
Aye.
Commissioner Cascaden?
Aye.
Commissioner Flynn?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.